At every level, the planet of Nakare-1011c has seen many Earthling species evolve and adapt to a new environment light years away from Earth. In just a few million years, many animals have adapted into a variety of strange and unique forms, and this series will be dedicated to providing a window to this world of unguided evolution and natural history. Welcome to the abandoned world of Parias. Last episode, we examined the unique pressures brought to the life forms of the small island of Irene. This region is small, and due to the lack of resources, we see a variety of strange giants and dwarves. In this episode, we explore an environment even less diverse than that small isle, one with interesting constraints that affect life that tries to live there. The Spinal Mountains is an eroding mountain range that stretches as a line from northern to central Lucindo. And whilst the mountain range is taller than the Appalachians, these mountains are generally losing ground every year with heavy erosion. This mountain range has very cold climates year-round, with some temperature spikes and divots, causing some temporary snowfall. Some snow can be found in passings here and there, but the mountain range itself is losing more snow cover year after year. This montane region causes a massive barrier between the tropical rains in the east to the desert of the west, making these mountains the starting points for lakes and rivers through the rest of the continent. The Spinal Mountains are surrounded on all sides by either tropical savanna, a seasonal monsoon climate, or a hot desert. Due to this climate isolation, this causes a small degree of biogeographic isolation for the life forms that colonize these lands. The plant life has had some unique challenges to grow in this environment. The most immediate threat to plants trying to grow on the mountain lands is the heavy cold, being the coldest region on the continent on a yearly average. This cold region is surrounded by warm or tropical climates, so many plants have a disadvantage in adapting to this region. They also have to deal with the high altitude, which can have effects on how animal-assisted pollination affects angiosperms in particular. Because of all of these conditions, non-angiosperms have become the dominant plants in the region. The smallest and most humble plants that call the Spinal Mountains home is the montane moss. This moss species that thrives on the mountain can attribute their success due to lack of competition alongside the heavy rains on the eastern side of the mountains. Montane moss primarily reproduces by budding, where moss split apart by herbivores will grow into new colonies of moss. This, alongside the conditions of the mountains being rather hospitable for moss, has allowed this species to spread green across the rocks, cliffs, and crags of the Spinal Mountains. Another small, rather simple plant that does well in the brisk highlands of northern Lucindo is the cliffgrass. Cliffgrass is another goosegrass descendant that has adapted to grow on the worst terrain imaginable for a terrestrial plant. These grasses love growing on near vertical cliffs and in between rocks, growing slowly but surely in places where most other plants couldn't dream to grow in. The largest plant that makes a living on the mountains is the spine pine. The spine pine is a white spruce descendant that is the tallest plant in the region. capable of growing up to 60 meters in height, or roughly 200 feet. This is due to the decent amount of rain alongside the lower gravity of Parias. However, this plant takes hundreds and hundreds of years to reach such great heights. This pine has adapted a cycle of 2 unique pine cones produced throughout an individual lifespan. The first of the pine cones produced are made with a smaller size, and the second pine cones produced are made giant in size, utilizing gravity to spread the latter downhill. The giant pine cones can be a hazard for animals in the region and can even sometimes cause small rock slides. The spine pine is not the only pine species that calls these mountains their domain. The creeping pine has marked its own niche as the small trees in the mountain lands. But something is off here. The creeping pine can be found in the plateaus of southern Lucindo. So how did these trees cross hundreds of kilometers across a large forest to get to the Spinal Mountains? This is due to the trees producing a lot of pine cones throughout a single life cycle, and these pine cones can be often brought by birds. All this plant needed was a single pine cone to be brought by a bird across the sky to new grounds, and it could establish a population. This has appeared to happen not only on the Spinal Mountains, but some other highland regions as well. Another plant species that exists in the mountains and beyond them alike is a hardy species of fern. The alpine tuber fern is a Dickinsonia descendant that has adapted their bodies to a half-submerged bulb that is tough for animals to reach into. This fern has also adapted to estivate or drop their leaves whenever times are tough. They use the nutrients stored in the bulbous body to regrow leaves when times get better. This adaptation has allowed this plant to grow eastward down the mountains, having a secondarily useful benefit that helps them in the drier and more seasonally affected monsoon scarlands, which will be described more in the next episode. The most specialized plant that can only exist in this environment is the tigerhole flax, a toadflax descendant that cannot survive for long anywhere else on Parias. This plant has a mutualistic, symbiotic relationship with the noble bee and has dedicated a lot of resources into accommodating its one and only pollinator. The tiger hole has a unique barrel-shaped flower with special stripes that attract noble bees to enter them and pollinate in the process. These plants move across the mountains pretty efficiently as their pollinator symbiont becomes more dependent on the flowers alone, to the point where their body shape makes them incapable of pollinating other flowers, both becoming specialized to each other alone in the process. The noble bee is a honeybee descendant that gains its name by queens inheriting and building multi-generational hives when the mother queen dies. The new queen will build upon the older queen's progress and make gargantuan nests that can only fall apart by a freak storm or an attack from mold. The fungi have made a presence on the mountains as well as plants. Chief among the fungal species on the Spinal Mountains is the common cap, a fungi that thrives across North Lucindo. The Spinal Mountains and the tropical savanna and jungles are both this fungi's home turf, and has been successful as one of the greatest decomposer species. This is a shiitake descendant, and it retains the aspect of being edible even millions of years after being abandoned by humanity. The fungi moved into more tropical environments in the process, but have increased competition down the mountain. The plants are the bottom of the food chain that the rest of the ecosystem relies on. The next rung on the food chain belongs to the primary consumers, which primarily are small and herbivorous. One great example of a small generalist is the spotted squirrel, a gray squirrel descendant that hasn't changed too much outside of their appearance and larger teeth. Their teeth are helpful in creating holes in giant trees for nesting or to hunt wood-eating bugs, and their funny-looking beards mark a specimen as sexually mature. The animals have also made a unique approach to adaptations and have made themselves successful in the region, dealing with a degree of isolation in comparison to the rest of mainland Lucindo. One such extreme example of isolation is the highest altitude fish species on Lucindo, which is the never shiner. The never shiner is a Texas shiner descendant that has become dull in coloration and more of a generalist. This fish can be found in the high lakes and were a result of a population left behind up in the montane region when humans left the planet millions of years ago. This species of fish eat aquatic plants, algae, and tadpoles, and are common prey to the birds that migrate to the mountains. A wood-eating herbivore that has to avoid the squirrels are the forest beetles, a beetle species that has evolved to eat wood for most of its life cycle. Larvae can spend years within a tree, either living or dead, and when they become adults, they eat fungi and pinecone seeds. This species has undergone Fisherian runaway, with males being around double the size of females and a shiny emerald green color. Females in the species are a duller shade of green, which allows them to be targeted less frequently in comparison to the males. Because males are brought into adulthood with such a huge handicap, the shinier males are chosen by females because if a male beetle has made it this far, despite their shiny vibrancy and size, they have proven their fitness outright. The cobra ribbonfowl is a duck descendant that is the prime example of migratory birds in the Spinal Mountains. Many birds that spend most of their lives on lower altitudes will rise up to these northern peaks to lay their eggs in a lower intensity environment. The cobra ribbonfowl is one of many globalist species that can be found on all continents on Parias, and they thrive in almost any habitat. They also have very unique characteristics in sexual dimorphism, with males having extravagant traits that females lack, chief among them being the extreme neck feathers that give males their cobra-like name. The largest herbivore that exists in the region is the Lucindan wandering sheep, which can be found in almost all environments across the continent of Lucindo. Their proneness to wandering made them great at colonizing environments, given enough low vegetation is present to feed a small group. These ram descendants tend to fight back, with thick horns on their heads being used more often on other species as they are on each other. They retain the bizarre ability of sheep and rams to be extremely good climbers, allowing herds to migrate upwards to the high mountains to exploit the lower density of predators. These sheep will be featured once more in future episodes, as they are truly one of the most dominant low grazers in central and southern Lucindo due to their unique suite of characteristics. However, the most successful herbivores in the mountain regions and in more tropical latitudes alike are the rathouse, or ratite mouse. Originating near the deserts, this genus of deer mouse descendants have a unique bipedal walking gait. When the ancestors of ratice first evolved, they began the road to bipedalism for a more efficient running speed, alongside standing on their hind limbs facultatively to more easily detect predators. However, when this trait became more and more selected, this group quickly arose to success due to an abundance of open niches in the tropical climates. The ability to walk on two legs became used for a variety of purposes, with multiple species adapting their arms and bodies for different purposes and niches. One of the largest species of ratice in Lucindo is the snowy rathouse, a grayish-white herbivore that mostly eats plants, but is willing to chomp on bugs when given the chance. This species uses its freed-up front limbs to help climb and grasp with long fingers and dexterous hands. The ratice, unlike their namesake, are a relatively smart group of mammals, capable of building complex nests and having social structures. The snowy ratice, given the environment they find themselves in, has resulted in a larger body size for a decrease in group size. Groups of snowy ratice are only about half a dozen strong, but each member can stand up to 1 meter tall and around 0.7 meters from head to tail. When confronted by predators, snowy ratice run to their nests, made by fallen trees, rocks, and bones. The animals described previously form the primary consumer class of the food chain, and thus are vulnerable to predators whose diet is other animals. A more generalist omnivore that may be missed or even tripped over by larger animals is the rockadillo, a rocky armadillo that has evolved a uniquely asymmetric body that makes each individual look unique as their own rocks. Their body has unique dents and protrusions and is covered totally in gray scales and fur. This sometimes can cause the individual to have a less efficient walking speed, but most make do with how their bony shells are formed. Being the descendants of 9-banded armadillos, they can retain 9 bands in their shell, but may have 7 to 6 bands in modern times. Rockadillos are monogamous, with males and females caring for their pebbles, or young rockadillos, together. They stay together for at least 1 breeding season until the young leave the nest and the father leaves to mate with another female. These animals eat whatever they can find, from carcasses to flowers to fish to moss. The ice frog is a unique amphibian that cannot be found anywhere else in the world. This frog, as tadpoles, eats algae in the water and as adults eat beetles, bees, and unattended bird eggs. These frogs are very arboreal and tend to be found over a dozen meters from the ground. They spend most of the day relaxing in the high ground and spend their nights attacking bugs and birds alike. When conditions get bad, these frogs can make a blanket of foam out of their own spit, which can help them hibernate for days or even weeks at a time. The spit is very foul-smelling, so most animals will tend to leave them alone if discovered. Another member of the food chain is the stone snake, which is one of the largest colubrids of Lucindo. Stone snakes can be up to 3 meters long and use their large, thick bodies to stay warm. They eat juvenile rathouse, birds, and frogs when given the chance, and primarily use constriction to kill their prey. To hide from stronger predators, they use their rocky coloration as camouflage, but don't have any other means of defense outside of hiding away in abandoned rathouse nests or rocky crags. They have a more active metabolism for a snake, which leads to a smaller lifespan and more active lifestyle. The secondary consumers play a key role in keeping primary consumers in check in a healthy ecosystem, but they themselves fall victim to the tertiary consumers, otherwise known as apex predators. On the peaks of the Spinal Mountains, there are 2 apex predators that focus on hunting different kinds of prey. One apex predator that is a threat to the ground animals is the menace bear, a black bear descendant with a more carnivorous lifestyle and aggressive saber teeth. Their hunting strategy has changed to overpowering their prey, pinning prey down, and finishing them off with a swift and efficient bite to an artery with their giant canines. Due to the smaller population size, this species of black bear has blue eyes being common in the overall population. Male menace bears have longer fangs than the females, which they sometimes use to attack other males. Despite the large fangs in males, it is the females that actually hold territory that males compete for in order to mate. After birth, the male will leave for another territory, but the mother will keep her young safe for up to 2 years. Due to their large size, they can capture snakes, ratice, wandering sheep, or any other large game they may come across. Rockadillos are a hard challenge for most menace bears, but they can sometimes be overturned and stabbed to death in their vulnerable underbellies. The other apex predator of the Spine Mountains is the great mountain eagle, a giant bald eagle that is hard to recognize from their white and brown ancestors. This species traded out the iconic colors for a more boring rocky gray, but that is not their only trait that makes them unique. They have thicker leg bones that allow attachment for strong muscles. These birds primarily kill with their knife-like talons, and a vice grip that can lead to some interesting encounters. These smart birds can often grab prey and throw them off of cliffs, which can easily lead to the prey's death without much struggle on the eagle's behalf. These birds are primarily gliders, using wind currents to keep them afloat. Nests are often made in the gigantic spine pine, and can be so heavy it can cause the tree to lean. Often, this bird will raid rat house nests, not to kill the rat house inside, but to steal their hard work from the materials they collected for their own nests. Couples in this species mate for life, and often will die of grief when one partner dies. All of these animals form a complex food web and are thriving on the mountains. Not all of life in the mountains were described here in full, as there are a large assortment of migratory birds that rest here on their journeys to a different final destination. In the next episode, we follow the migration of birds downward from the mountain and onto the monsoon scarlands, a region with heavy canyons, rapid rivers, and extreme weather patterns. Thank you guys all for watching the video to the end. It really means a lot. If you can like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, it makes sure the channel has the momentum to keep going. These videos can take days or weeks to make, so if you could help by hitting that like button, it really helps. The link to the Parias Discord server can be found in the description and the pinned comment. Also, at the time of recording this video, I reached 1,009 subscribers, and all of you mean the world to me right now. Thank you guys so much for being here.